Great speeches bookend the speech with a bold opening and an inspiring or emotional closing, and they should really relate to each other, and they should really relate to your purpose.
A note before we get started. Go to d96toastmasters.ca to download the slideshow presentation and the worksheets referenced in this workshop.
Come with a topic, leave with a speech. I want to turn your topic into a speech because that's really the goal here. The intent is to help promote public speaking and to help teach new Toastmasters or intermediate Toastmasters. So for those of you who are fans of the old days when we had books, I loved bookshelves and I always liked nice bookends. I think of the opening and closing of your speech as bookends. They should relate to each other, they should be unique, they should be interesting, and they're the thing that puts a nice beginning and end to the rest of your speech content. I've always heard that an audience will remember the first thing you told them and the last thing you made them feel. Great speeches bookend the speech with a bold opening and an inspiring or emotional closing, and they should really relate to each other, and they should really relate to your purpose. So the opening and closing module will help you describe some impactful speech openings and closings. It'll let you write one or two possible openings and closings for your speech. And again, it's for your speech. So there will be a little worksheet that you can jot down some notes. All right. In the chat, I'd like people to say whether they find any of these speech openings really, really impactful. Hi, I'm Scott, and today I'm here to talk to you about giving a speech. What do you think? Does it land? Yuri, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of comments. No, socks. Nope.
Exactly.
Very well.
If you noticed up front, Kevin introduced me. So that way you knew who I was and I could launch straight into come with a topic, leave with a speech. When you open, you want to be bold. Don't introduce yourself. Let the introducer give you your name, a little bit of background, and your topic. How about this? Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. I hear that one a lot. How does that land for people?
Not the same. A little bit boring. They want it a little bit more spicy, I guess.
Exactly. And it is important to use.
Okay.
And what works better is grab the audience's attention with a really nice opening, then you move to protocol, and then you continue on with your speech, because the first thing you want to do is get their attention. How about this? I actually did this recently at Top Story, and it got noted. I'm really sorry. I just threw this speech together last night, and to be honest with you, I'm not worthy of the oxygen that I'm breathing in this room. How does that grab your audience?
Down.
Exactly.
No, somebody wrote here a big no. Yeah, somebody laughed and said way better, but with a little bit of sarcasm, I think.
Yes.
Not worth listening.
Yes. The first thing you want to do is get their attention in a positive way and not get their attention by undercutting your credibility as to why you're up there speaking. How about this one? Can you hear me okay at the back there? I've seen that a lot.
Nope.
Nope.
It says unless you are in a very big room or your mic has problems.
And for folks who showed up at 2:00 today, a whole bunch of us were on about 1:30, and we did sound checks and we did all of that beforehand. So we were pretty sure that when I started, everybody could hear me. So those speech openings, the first two are not impactful. The last two are probably impactful, but for all of the wrong reasons. When you open your speech, you want to capture your audience's attention and do it immediately. A couple of Princeton psychologists a few years ago did some studies, and they found that people make a really rapid first impression in about 1/10 of a second, and within 7 seconds, they have some idea that sticks with them about what you're like. So if you get up there, you want to get your audience's attention immediately and make a clear point. Show some confidence. If you want to build credibility, make sure you come across as confident and know your speech opening cold. Some people memorize their whole speech, some people memorize parts of it. If you have a really bold opening, memorize that. Again, clearly link the opening to the purpose. You may not have fully told everyone what your purpose is. It might emerge through the speech, but make sure that your opening and later your closing are really, really clear on being closely related to your purpose. Combine words, voice, actions, images, and props. And this works better when you're in person, but even in Zoom. Words, voice, and maybe images if you've got some, if you're presenting pictures or something like that. Make sure that not only have you got a couple of these things, but they relate well together. And lastly, bonus points if you can bring out who you are. Be a little bit vulnerable. And this, to be honest with you, when I started Toastmasters 5 years ago, I thought it was all about, let's be professional, let's present facts. And of all of the learnings I really have taken away is, one, be really authentic and be yourself and connect with the audience. And authenticity and being yourself is how you do that. All right, there are lots of different techniques. This is a small list, but you can recite a famous or witty quote. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. It's a nice quote from John Quincy Adams. You can open with a question. I asked everybody if they had brought a topic because I was hoping you did. The idea with a question is it invites the audience to go into their head and start thinking about what your speech is about, and it helps engage them. Sometimes you can ask poll questions. Lots of people, and it works a little bit better in person, but by a show of hands, how many people have experienced bullying? That would be a great way to start a talk on bullying. Make a bold statement, and maybe you can refer to an authority. I would say we're in a climate crisis. Action needs to be taken. So says outgoing Bank of England Governor Mark Carney. So that's a bold statement. It's from someone who's in authority. Mark Carney used to be the governor of the Bank of Canada before going to England. So it's not just some guy on the internet. It's someone who is thoughtful and has a real view. Invite the audience to imagine something, whether it's a past or future circumstances. Can you imagine a world where everyone said exactly what was on their mind, unfiltered, all the time? I don't know if any of you are in long-term relationships, but I don't think that world would have any long-term relationships. I would be very honest, but it would be a bit of a problem. And tell a compelling story. If it's your story, even better. And when you open, you don't have to tell the whole story. If you're telling stories, it's nice to give it to them in little bite-sized bits and make sure that they're interested enough to stay engaged. All right, Let's look at a couple of really nice speech openings.
Darren Tay, outsmart, outlast. Darren, outsmart, outlast, Darren Tay. All the best.
Hey loser, how do you like your new school uniform? I think it looks great on you. Those were the words of my high school bully, Greg Umberfield. Now, if you're all wondering whether the underwear that Greg used was clean, I had the same question.
All right, that was 2016 World Public Speaking Champion, Darren Tay Wen-ji. I'm going to give you two more. One is another world champion of public speaking, Dananjay Hederachi. And here's his.
I see something. Danajaya Hedirachi.
You and I are not very different from this flower. Just like this flower is unique, you are unique. All of us has something special that makes us as beautiful. Do you know what makes you special? Now the answer to that can be a little difficult to find, because sometimes life has a cruel way of picking out your petals, breaking you in two, and throwing you into the trash. And when you're broken, it's very difficult to feel special.
Okay, that's opening number 2. I'm going to give you my all-time favorite, which is number 3.
So imagine a big explosion as you climb through 3,000 feet. Imagine a plane full of smoke. Imagine an engine going clack, 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 clack. Sounds scary. Well, I had a unique seat that day. I was sitting in 1D. I was the only one who could talk to the flight attendants. So I looked at them right away, and they said, no problem, we probably hit some birds. The pilot had already turned the plane around, and we weren't that far. You could see Manhattan. 2 minutes later, 3 things happened at the same time. The pilot lines up the plane with the Hudson River. It's usually not the route. He turns off the engines. Now imagine being on a plane with no sound. And then he says 3 words, as unemotional 3 words as I've ever heard. He says, brace for impact. I didn't have to talk to the flight attendant anymore. I could see in her eyes, it was terror. Life was over. And I want to share with you 3 things I learned about myself that day.
All right, what techniques you saw in some of those openings that you found effective? Yeah, and so there were props. I love a couple of the props in there. Darren, I never would have thought that the World Championship of Public Speaking would walk out on stage and put underwear on over his pants. But he did, and it was effective. Dananjay, and we'll talk a little bit more about him later, had the rose. And Rick Elias, I get goosebumps when he talks about the clack, 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 clack of the engine. And one of the really effective things there is he said, life is over at the end. at that point, he doesn't know that he's going to survive. Now, of course, the audience does, but he doesn't know, and he's taking you into a place. And when I see that speech, I used to fly a lot for work, and I was just transfixed. I like the vulnerable visuals and pauses, and aside from the third one, even the third one a little bit, had some humor, and that opens us up. All right, let's go back to the share and talk a little bit about closing your speech. Okay, how about these for memorable speech closings? The red light is on, so I'll stop here before I get clapped off. How's that land for everybody? No. If you see the red light, make sure that you have a little bit of time to wrap up. Just give them your closing and get off the stage. Thanks for listening to my speech today. Nice to thank people, but really the last thing out of your mouth, you can thank them, but if you end with a bold and memorable statement, your audience will thank you. And that's really what it's about. That's all I can think of on the topic today. No, and if that's all you can think about, then wrap up nicely. Reiterate your main point, reiterate your purpose, and get off the stage. My advice would be, it's great to take questions. It does engage the audience. Give yourself a minute after, cut the questions off when you've got a minute left, and then leave yourself 30 to 60 seconds to end with your closing message. You want people to walk out. You want the last thing they hear to be something you decided.
Yeah.
Closing with a minute. Yep.
No, there was somebody who wrote, leave it for the closing or the Q&A. Don't use it on your speech.
Depends on the speech. And if you're, doing an informative speech, having a Q&A lets people ask the questions that you might not have answered with your speech. But as I say, try and wrap up with your message so that they walk out with it. Memorable closing. Again, it's got to relate directly to your opening or to your purpose, sorry. Leave the audience with an emotion. I've heard people will remember the first thing you say and the last thing you made them feel. If you leave them with a memorable feeling, they will remember your speech when they walk out that door. Lots of good speakers end with a great closing statement, and then they pause. Spend 2, 3, 4 seconds, let the audience absorb it, and that's it. Then they go back to the Toastmaster or chair. If you've got a persuasive speech, give them a call to action. Tell your audience what to do next. And make it something that they can do today. If you're talking about solving global warming, well, nothing anyone does today is going to solve the problem today. Give them one thing they can do today. Start recycling, or, take your food waste and compost that. Give them one thing that's a simple step that they can do. Informative speeches, always great to remind people and just recap the key points. You don't have to add anything. It's just a reminder that here's something that, here's what we talked about. And you can also use techniques that we used in the speech openings as closings. Now, the title of this module is Bookends, and I'd really like it when the opening and the closing are a pair. It's like those two bookends. A couple of things that does, it helps the audience understand that this is the opening and we're wrapping it up with a nice bow and you can take it home. So if you open with a story, finish the story or tell a related story. Sometimes if you're trying to convince them to take a different perspective, you can say, imagine this story if I had done something different. Give them a different ending. If you start with a question, you might answer the question, ask it again if you have tried to persuade the audience to take a different perspective. If you have a quotation, you can reflect back on it, repeat it, offer a similar or contrasting one. If you started with a bold statement, again, repeat it, change it, somehow comment on that and relate it back to your purpose. You might start with humor. Again, call back on that humor. Give them something similar to know so that the audience knows this is the end. If you start with any concept, you can come up with a contrasting concept. So if you open with something about birth, close with death or rebirth, or something that relates. And a prop or a slide. Use the same prop or slide or something, but modify it a little bit. And if you remember in Denanje's speech where he ripped up the rose, at the end of his speech, he goes back to the garbage can and he pulls out a complete rose, because that's kind of the point of his talk is rejuvenation and coming back from difficulties. And so the rose comes back. All right, I'm going to give you about a minute or two to just go back to your worksheet, think about how you might close your speech. And you can also fill out the opening and closing a speech. I'd just like you to take away from this and reflect on how you can be able to describe some techniques for creating impactful openings and related closings. And I'm also hoping that this will give you some ideas and you can write a couple of openings and closings for the speech topic that you brought with you today.
That's the end of Module 2, Opening and Closing. Now go over to Module 3 for Speech Structure. Go to d96toastmasters.ca to download the resources referenced for this workshop, including the slideshow presentation and the worksheets. A link is provided in the description of the video below. While you're here, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment below to tell us what else you'd like to see here.